6 months ago, he walked into her hospital room with divorce papers in one hand, and her best friend standing behind him. Her best friend didn't even look back. He said,
"You're no longer fit to stand beside me."
She said,
"Then you should have never let me build your world."
They left. The door closed, and for the first time, alone, she broke. They left her with nothing. What they didn't know is that nothing, in the hands of the right woman, is the most dangerous thing in the world. If this story already has you, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Subscribe to ChristieJStory so you don't miss a single story of what Alara does next. And if you're already part of the family, drop a comment right now. Tell us what you would have done. Tell me, what did you feel when that door closed? Let's get started. They stopped coming after the first week. Ji-hoon visited twice, then once. Then a message through his assistant, something about schedule, something about the doctors needing space, and then nothing at all. The flowers from his organization stopped after 10 days. The calls from his board members stopped after 2 weeks. Soo-yeon, her best friend, the woman who knew every scar and every secret, stopped answering after 3. Alara lay in the silence they had built around her and felt the full weight of it. Not just the wheelchair. Not just the accident. The weight of a life she had built with her own hands, brick by brick, strategy by strategy, 3 a.m. by 3 a.m., that was still standing without her name on a single wall. She thought about the deals she had negotiated while Ji-hoon slept, the frameworks she had drafted that he presented as his own thinking, the empire she had built from the ground up, every system, every account, every back channel that lived entirely in her head. She had given him everything, and he had left her in a private hospital room like a chapter he had already finished reading. One afternoon, 11 days in, she picked up her phone, scrolled to Soo-yeon's name, stared at it for a long time, put it back down. That was the moment she understood, completely, finally, that she was alone. She looked at the wheelchair, then at the window, then at her hands. Everything I built with these. A long pause. Then I can build something else. She didn't open her laptop that night. She wasn't ready yet. She just sat in the dark and let herself feel every single thing she had been holding back since the moment that door closed. Because she understood, already, instinctively, that she couldn't build what came next on top of unprocessed pain. She had to feel it first. All of it. Then she could move. She didn't have a plan yet. She didn't have allies. She didn't have anything except 2 hands and a mind that had built an empire once. And the specific, quiet, unshakable knowledge that she could do it again. This time, for herself. Soo-yeon moved into the penthouse on a Wednesday. Alara knew because Clara, the front desk attendant who had worked the building for 4 years, sent one message. She brought movers. Alara read it, set the phone down, sat with what that meant. Her best friend sleeping in her bed, walking through her rooms, standing at her window, looking at her city. That specific kind of hurt that doesn't have a clean name. 3 days later, she watched Ji-hoon's press conference on the hospital television, announcing her merger, her framework. 40 pages drafted at 3 a.m. His voice, his name, his confidence. She didn't turn it off. She made herself watch every second. Because she needed to understand, with no softening, exactly what had been taken and exactly who had taken it. Inside the organization, Soo-yeon stepped into every space Alara had occupied. Charity galas, donor dinners, wearing Alara's style without realizing it. Ji-hoon corrected her publicly, compared her constantly. Alara would have handled that differently. Alara never needed this explained twice. When Alara heard this through an old contact, she sat with it quietly. Every time he said her name, he reminded every person in that room that she had existed, that she had built it, that she was still real. He was erasing her with one hand and invoking her with the other. He didn't even realize what that meant. Late that night, she opened her laptop for the first time. Files, systems, structures. His name on everything she built. She read for a long time. Then, blank document. Cursor blinking. 2:47 a.m. Everything she had built lived only in her head. She had never given him the map. One line. He has everything I built, but he doesn't have what I know. She started to type. She wasn't planning yet. She was remembering. Everything she knew, everything he had used, everything he had no idea she still held. The map was in her head, and she was the only one who could read it. She found the file on a Thursday night. Moving through Ji-hoon's internal systems, back channels she had built and never disclosed, she opened a directory she had created herself. Inside it, a file she had never created. Someone else had placed it there, using her structure, her naming convention, her exact labeling system. Someone who had studied how she worked. The file was labeled Operation Loyalty Test. Ji-hoon's digital signature at the top, her name in the subject field. She read it, fully, slowly. The accident wasn't punishment, wasn't personal. Ji-hoon had been tested by someone above him to prove he could sever a personal tie without hesitation, to prove he was controllable. She was the test. He passed. She closed the file. So you didn't break me because you wanted to. Pause. You broke me because someone told you to prove you could. She opened the blank document. Typed. Not from grief. From decision. This was the moment Alara stopped being broken and started being dangerous. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a woman alone in a dark room, choosing. Building her first shell corporation, she hit a wall. Holding structure already occupied. Cayman Islands, 3 years ago. Account ending in 0047. 3 years ago. 1 year before she met Ji-hoon. Her fingers stopped for exactly 3 seconds. Someone was here before her. She rerouted, filed the number away. It would fit eventually. You made me the test. A pause. Now I'm going to be the result. Before we go any further, if you are new to ChristieJStory, welcome to the family. Subscribe right now so Chapter 5 comes straight to you the moment it drops. And if you've been here, drop a comment. Tell me, did you feel the exact moment Alara decided? Because I did. What they saw. Alara, broken, isolated, forgotten. What they didn't see was any of it. Every night, after the nurses made their last rounds, she worked. 12 shell corporations, 12 countries. Every transfer structured below the reporting threshold. 2 board members turned, not with threats, with truth. 2 was enough for now. Marcus, Ji-hoon's right-hand man, ran a routine audit. Found a dormant shell corporation. Registered 8 months ago. 2 weeks before the accident. 1 match across every name with system access. Her. She had opened this before any of it happened. Marcus closed the file without reporting it. He had just chosen a side. Ji-hoon sensed instability he couldn't name. Late night, alone in the penthouse, old photograph. Alara, laughing, unguarded. Phone rang, unknown number. He answered immediately. Posture dropped, voice low. I know it went too far. She's not a factor anymore. Jaw tightened. I said she's not a factor. He hung up, poured his drink out, opened one file. One word. Architect. His face, for the first time, looked less like power and more like fear. 3 a.m. Hospital room. Dark. Ilara gripped the wheelchair arms, tried to stand. Halfway.
Legs shook. Sat back down. Tried again. One hand on the wall. 4 seconds. Standing. Sat back down. Breathing hard, eyes forward. She thought about the press conference. Ji-hoon at that podium, her words in his mouth, her work wearing his name. She thought about the phone she had almost called 11 days into this. Soo-yeon's name on the screen. She thought about putting it back down. And she thought, sitting in this dark room with shaking legs and no one watching, that every single thing that had been done to her was going to mean something. Not someday. Now. She opened the laptop. She kept working. 4 seconds standing, then back to the laptop. That was her whole story in 2 sentences. Getting up, getting back to work. Over and over until the work was done. Marcus sent the message at 4:17 a.m. 4 lines. I know you're not broken. I know what he did. I know what the file says. M. Ilara read it twice. 14 years inside that organization. Every decision, every movement. Not hunting her, defecting. She typed one word. When. 40 seconds. Whenever you need me. Soo-yeon had stopped sleeping properly. 3 weeks lying beside Ji-hoon in Ilara's bed, in Ilara's penthouse, wearing Ilara's life like a costume that didn't fit. She had been going through his private files, not looking for anything specific, just looking. The way a person looks when what they were told and what is true are no longer the same shape. She found the message on a Wednesday night. Ji-hoon's files. Sent the night before the accident. She read it 3 times. Her hand started shaking before she reached the end. She picked up her phone. Dialed. Ilara's screen lit up. Soo-yeon. She stared at it through 4 rings. Didn't answer, but smiled. Next morning, encrypted channel. No name, no identifier. 4 words. I know what happened. Soo-yeon had found something, and she had chosen Ilara. Ilara pulled up account 0047 instead of replying, stared at it for a long time. 3 years, 1 year before Ji-hoon. She traced the registration details slowly. Jurisdiction, structure, the legal name attached to the holding. She didn't recognize the name. But something about the account structure felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain. The way a song feels familiar before you remember where you heard it. Like someone who thought the way she thought, who built the way she built, who knew 3 years ago that this territory would matter. She closed it. It would fit eventually. She could feel that it would. 2 people reaching toward her simultaneously. Marcus from inside the organization, Soo-yeon from inside Ji-hoon's life. The net was tightening around him from every direction, and somewhere behind account 0047, someone she couldn't name yet, was already 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room, including her. The merger date moved on a Monday morning. Ji-hoon accelerated closing, 3 weeks early. 72 hours. If the merger closed before she hit 51%, the kill switch clause she had written and buried in the original charter died with it. 2 shell corporations flagged. 1 board ally flipped. She was at 38%, needed 51%. She turned off the lights, sat in the dark. This dark was different from Chapter 1. In those first weeks, she had sat in the dark because the pain was too heavy to carry in the light. This dark was chosen, deliberate. The dark of a woman who needed to think without distraction. She was not grieving anymore. She was calculating. There was a version of this moment, 3 months ago in this same room where she would have cried. She didn't cry now. She opened her laptop. The light from the screen hit her face like something being switched back on. Then we do it in one night. She stood up to say it, because she had decided she was done sitting down. 9 systems simultaneously. 4 hours. Transfer complete. Primary control acquired. 54.7%. Then, one notification she hadn't triggered. Anonymous. 3.1% transferred directly into her primary holding. Trail died in 40 seconds. One detail survived, originating account ending in 0047. The account that blocked her. Registered the same year as the loyalty test file. Someone handed her 3.1% of her own victory. She had not won this war alone. Across the city, alarms triggered across Jihoon's network. Emergency board meeting, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The same morning, Alara had already scheduled to walk in. He didn't know she was already on the agenda. He didn't know 0047 had just changed everything. He didn't know a lot of things. That was exactly the problem. The night before the boardroom, Marcus sat across from Alara. No laptops, no screens. You knew about the hit before it happened. Not a question. I noticed the irregularities 3 days before, tracked the order, confirmed it was real. And you let it happen. I had 2 options, stay invisible forever or become the accident. Silence. Jihoon signed the order. He didn't write it. 5 seconds of complete stillness. Someone above Jihoon wrote the order, used her as a loyalty test, handed her 3.1% through 0047. The same someone. All 3, the entire time. She stood, full height. Then tomorrow isn't just about Jihoon. No. Then Marcus said the thing that changed everything. There's something else. She waited. Soo-yeon didn't choose to be in that room. Silence. Jihoon fabricated evidence against her, embezzlement, enough to destroy her completely. He gave her one choice, stand behind him or watch everything collapse. Alara went very still. She walked into that hospital room terrified. Alara thought about the almost. Soo-yeon, almost looking back. She hadn't almost looked back out of guilt. She had almost looked back because she was desperate to. Every scene, every moment, every time she had replayed that door closing and felt the specific weight of her best friend's betrayal rearranged itself into a completely different shape. How long have you known? Long enough to feel sick about it. Jihoon hadn't just taken her empire, he had taken her best friend. Weaponized her. Trapped her in a role she never chose. Alara sat in the dark for a long time after Marcus left. Tomorrow. She wasn't just walking in for herself. She was walking in for both of them. 9 a.m., 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling glass, city in full morning light. Global investors, syndicate leaders. Jihoon, confident. Deal about to close. Soo-yeon to his right, performing the role, like always. The doors opened at 9:04. She walked in, not in a wheelchair. The board members who had sent flowers to that hospital room were the first to stand. Not out of respect. Out of the feeling of realizing they had completely misread a situation, and the consequences were already in motion. 5 seconds of silence. Gentlemen, I believe this meeting was about a merger. Let's discuss who you're actually merging with. 54.7% of syndicate debt. Primary creditor position. Kill switch clause. Activated. Loyalty test file. Slid to syndicate leaders. Not to Jihoon. Around him. This authorized my accident. Look at the header. 3 leaders pushed back immediately. They recognized the name. They wanted no part of what came next. Soo-yeon reached into the folder in front of her. slid it across, didn't look at Ji-hoon. I've had that file for 4 months, Soo-yeon. Then you know what it says. Tell them. One breath. Ji-hoon sent a message to the driver the night before the accident. Steadied. It said, make it permanent. Silence. Ji-hoon didn't deny it. She looked back with nothing at all. Kill switch activated. 6 months ago, she had sat in a hospital room and almost called a number she knew wouldn't answer. She didn't need to call anyone now. She was standing at the head of everything she had built. This time, her name was on all of it. You knew. Not everything. Just enough to win. Security moved toward Ji-hoon. He straightened his jacket. As he passed Alara, low, private, if you knew about the hit, you know I didn't write that order. Ask yourself who benefits if we both fall. Escorted out, room emptied. Soo-yeon was the last to leave. She stood at the door, looked at Alara with 6 months of captivity and 1 morning of release in her eyes simultaneously. I know what he did to you. Soo-yeon's breath caught. I knew before I walked in here. Silence. We'll talk. Not today, but we'll talk. Soo-yeon nodded once, left. Alara stood alone at the head of the table, opened Soo-yeon's folder, read it. Make it permanent. 4 months she had carried that. Now it was finished. Her face completely still. She pulled up account 0047. 3 years. 1 year before Ji-hoon. She thought about what Ji-hoon had said as he passed her. Who benefits if we both fall? She looked at 0047. You do, don't you? She dialed. 2 rings. I've been waiting for you to call, Alara. How long have you been watching me? Since before he found you. Who are you? A pause, longer than comfortable. The voice shifted, dropped, became something rawer than the composed warmth of a moment before. Someone who should have come back sooner. Alara went completely still. She knew that voice, not from a meeting, not from a boardroom, not from any room that held power or strategy or money, from a kitchen, from a hallway, from the sound of her name spoken in a specific way that no one in the world had ever spoken it except one person. One person Ji-hoon had told her 8 years ago, sitting across a dinner table, holding her hand, was dead. She stood at the head of her table. The city spread below the glass. Everything she had built, everything that had been taken, everything she had taken back. And on the other end of a phone line, her mother, alive, who had been watching since before Ji-hoon found her, who had built account 0047 3 years ago, who had handed her 3.1% at her moment of greatest need, who had been the architect of her survival the entire time. Are you ready to meet me? The silence lasted a long time. Then, quietly, finally, completely, yes. And that, ChristieJStory family, is where we leave Alara today, standing at the head of a table that now belongs to her, holding a phone, hearing a voice she grieved for 8 years. If this story moved you, share it with one person right now. That one share is how this family grows. Subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment. Did you see that coming? Did you feel it in Chapter 5 when the account felt familiar? Do you want Part 2? Because Alara's story is not finished. I'll see you in the next one. This has been ChristieJStory.